So today, as I record it on Monday the 16th, we officially announced the hiring of Chris Fleming as our third assistant coach for the men's basketball team. If you've been following the channel or paid attention on Twitter, you know that this is who they were hiring from the Portland Trail Blazers. He is the offensive assistant that's going to be replacing Ryan Pannone that took the job at Arkansas State. He is a guy that's very, very well respected in the industry. He coached for the German national team and is a guy that has had a ton of history, not only in the NBA, but also in European basketball, like I said, in Germany and Bundesliga. So he is a guy that definitely has a lot of experience, both as a head coach and as assistant. He is somebody that has had a very, very good he has had a very good track record on offense or coaching offenses at the NBA level. Nate Oates' comment on the hiring of Chris Fleming was, "We're excited to welcome Chris to Tuscaloosa. Be a huge addition to our staff. Brings over decades worth of coaching experience in the NBA and overseas, most notably with the German national team. He's known for being exceptional player development and brings modern approach to the game. Not only is Chris a great coach, but a high character individual. Will be a huge asset to our program. Welcome him and his family to Tuscaloosa." And then they also had a coach from the current Cavs head coach, Kenny Atkins. Chris is an outstanding basketball coach. His strong background in player development and his modern approach to the strategy of the game will help him integrate seamlessly into Nate Oates' staff at Alabama. Obviously, so, this is a guy that's very, very well respected in the industry, again, both at the NBA level and at the overseas level. So that is something that, is good, when you're looking at Nate Oates' offense. I know he tries to, you saw that with Pannone as well, having some European experience. That is something that I'm sure they're trying to help integrate when you're talking about Nate Oates' philosophy, because he has his style of basketball and his style of offense, but it's ever changing, right? Based on the players that you have, based on the people that can execute the certain things that you're trying to execute, Nate has changed his philosophy over the years. If you have a big that can shoot versus a big that can't versus a whatever, right? Everything changes how that philosophy goes, and having a guy that is an offensive guru, again, that has that experience at multiple levels of basketball will be a huge addition to our offense. And I'm very curious to see how that translates onto the basketball court. I know Ryan Pannone is big shoes to fill. He was very well known about posting random, out of bounds underplays from some league you've never heard of in Turkey or something. Some league you may have never heard of over in Turkey. So I am very curious to see, what quirks or, how Chris Fleming is as a basketball coach, and does it play out on the court, and how does that work out? So I'm very, very curious to see how that all works out. The other one is Nate Oates. I know I previously mentioned that he was going to be doing this, but he is officially at Team USA, the U19 basketball camp. So the Team USA U19 basketball camp, they have the team has been assembled, and he's one of the on-the-court coaches, was offered to be that by Tommy Lloyd from Arizona as one of the coaches helping out with that. There are a lot of guys on that roster, some of which are currently committed or are going to school this coming season, like Jasper Johnson or AJ DeBansa or some others, which Nate either recruited or spoke to. We got Mikhail Brown and others that Alabama unfortunately missed out on for a variety of different reasons. And there are also two guys in that are currently uncommitted, but have made their way onto the roster, or onto the current camp roster, and that is Caleb Holt and Darion Rippey. The reason I mention these two guys, and we're going to kind of shift over to Alabama recruiting for basketball, is Caleb Holt was on an unofficial visit to Alabama just last week. So, as of the time that I recorded one of the episodes last week, he was on an unofficial visit. And, he is a name that Alabama is definitely after, full bore going to see. So obviously Nate Oates being able to be there and be a coach with him for this U19 camp. Obviously it's going to be, he's not the main coach, so it is going to be a little bit different, but obviously having hands-on experience with a coach like that, any of the players that are there that are uncommitted, that is a big deal to have your coach be one of the ones that's helping them out with that. The other one that I mentioned was Daron Rippey. He actually, is again another guy that Alabama is on after, very big, and he has actually set an official visit to Alabama, and this was set before the basketball camp, and it was set for September the 13th. If you remember back, that is the same date that Jackson Richardson is going to be coming on campus, the brother of Jace Richardson, son of Jason Richardson, that I previously talked about in another episode. So that's shaping up to be a very large recruiting weekend for Alabama basketball. From what I have heard, they have not set an official date with Caleb Holt for an official visit. I would expect, obviously, Nate and Preston to try to lock one down for Caleb Holt for an actual official. We'll be very curious when that comes out. I will, of course, report it whenever it does come out. The other two, we have two more guys that have set official visit dates. One of them I'm unaware of the date, just unfortunately because I don't have on three. I know Joe Tipton, kind of teased that Colbin Landrew, which is currently a 4-star guy across most recruiting services. For some reason, ESPN doesn't have him rated, but he is a guy who has set an official visit with Alabama, as well as Terrace Bowie did set an official visit for September the 6th. So early football season, some of those early weekends, that's often when you'll see Nate Oats and Preston bringing in guys. Obviously, he does mention about how he has to be very careful about who they bring in for an official visit because they don't want to bring in somebody that's just there to see an Alabama football game. He does want, obviously, people to actually show up that might be interested in coming to Alabama. These are very serious people looking to commit. Whether they commit to Alabama or not, they don't have to guarantee they're committing. They just have to, it has to be an actual fit for us, not just, offering somebody a visit so they can come watch a football game. Because I know that happened a lot, like with your Alabama-Georgia game last season, for example. So that is kind of what you're looking at when you're looking at some of these, recruits. Again, Alabama now has, 5 guys that we've been closely linked to. I'm sure there are many, many others, but, the names that we've been linked to over the last week or so have been Caleb Holt. Again, he was on campus on an unofficial. You got Daron Rippey, who has set his date for September the 13th, the same date that Jackson Richardson will be on campus. Then you got Colbin Landrew and Terrace Bowie. Again, Terrace Bowie is going to be on September the 6th. So Alabama basketball recruiting is, getting very quickly moving. I am curious, because they went out, and I previously mentioned about how they went out and started meeting with some of the early 2026 guys a little earlier than they had in years past. It does sound like they've made some headway with some of the higher ranked recruits. Most of the ones that we've mentioned, in this are all 5 of these guys are top 100 guys. Caleb Holt, Daron Rippey, Jackson Richardson are all more highly ranked than that. I believe they're top 50 guys or even better. So, these are very top recruits that Alabama is in with. Again, with Nate Oats coaching in that U19 basketball camp that Caleb Holt and Daron Rippey are both members of, that is something that I am very curious to see what type of impact that's going to have on their potential recruitment. Now, obviously, Nate Oats is not the only coach that is coaching them, that is also probably recruiting them at the same time. So, this is not, giving us some advantage over some other team, but I am very curious to see, does that play out in our favor where, these players have now seen what Nate Oats' coaching style is like, up close and personal, obviously with him having coached for their camp, and then obviously coming on the official visit. Would be very curious to see if we could lock down either Holt or Rippey. I know both guys are seen as very good defenders as well as great scorers, so I am very curious to see how Alabama basketball recruiting does shape out. As I previously mentioned at the top of the show, I do have an interview that I plan to get recorded. I'm trying to schedule the time with one of the guys. It's funny enough, it's actually another group that's partnered with Believe, but they cover Alabama football very, very closely. You will recognize the name and the group that he's with, just as a little bit of a tease. I do plan to talk a lot of football recruiting and other things with him. and we will talk all about Alabama football. So that's why we went super heavy on the basketball in this episode. I know people kind of split in between both sports that follow the channel. So as always, if there's anything you are interested in that I did not cover, throw it down in the comments. I do read all the comments. I try to reply to as many of them as I can. I'm happy to cover anything that comes up. I know this episode was a little bit unique because we did cover some track and field and baseball that isn't always covered on the channel, but I try to cover, again, major things that happen around the university. That's kind of my goal with this channel and I thought that obviously winning a national title is something that needs to be shouted out. So I wanted to shout them out for this purpose. So thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I really do appreciate it. And I will catch you in the next episode. Peace.